Welcome to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Brief. This is what's been going on in China in the past 24 hours. China has spent years positioning itself as the champion of open, affordable artificial intelligence. The message from Beijing has been simple. U.S. companies want to lock AI away, while China wants to make it available to the world. There is a little bit of classic geopolitical theater there, the kind of thing we've seen from great powers for decades. Everybody wants to look like the responsible global leader while quietly trying to make sure they hold the best cards. But now China is running into a problem. The same open AI models helping Chinese companies gain influence overseas could also create risks for the Chinese government at home. At the World AI Conference in Shanghai, Xi Jinping warned that China needs to continue refining measures to prevent AI from becoming uncontrollable. That is a pretty revealing statement from a leader whose entire political system is built around controlling information, controlling narratives, and controlling access to technology. The concern in Beijing is that advanced AI systems could be used by hackers, criminals, terrorists, or foreign intelligence services. But the bigger internal fear is political. What happens if an AI chatbot starts providing information that challenges the official party narrative? What happens if ordinary Chinese citizens can use these systems to get around censorship filters and access information about topics like Xinjiang, Taiwan, corruption, or domestic protests? For the Chinese Communist Party, information control has always been a cornerstone of power. AI is basically the newest contestant entering that arena, and it is a very complicated opponent because it can be both a tool of control and a tool that breaks control. The military implications are even more significant. A Reuters review of Chinese academic papers and patents found that Chinese military-linked researchers have been using outputs from advanced U.S. AI models, including systems developed by OpenAI and Anthropic, to train their own specialized AI systems. The technique is called model distillation. Think of it as taking a highly capable AI model and teaching a smaller, cheaper model some of its most useful skills. It does not create an exact copy, but it can transfer valuable capabilities. And this is where things get interesting from a national security perspective. Chinese researchers have explored using these smaller AI systems for military applications, including cyber operations, surveillance, drone imagery analysis, navigation, and targeting support. One PLA-linked research effort used an American AI model to help analyze military software code before creating a domestic system that could operate inside Chinese networks. The significance is pretty clear. China is trying to close gaps created by U.S. restrictions on advanced chips and computing power by finding other ways to extract value from the world's leading AI systems. It is a little like trying to build a championship team by studying the playbook of the other side. The question is where legitimate learning ends and strategic technology transfer begins. That AI competition is spreading into another major technology battlefield: robotics. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission is moving toward restricting imports of Chinese humanoid and animal-like robots over national security concerns. U.S. officials argue these systems could eventually collect sensitive data from homes, businesses, and government environments while becoming a critical part of future AI-powered economies. China responded angrily, accusing Washington of using national security as a reason to suppress Chinese companies. Beijing also warned it could retaliate. The challenge for the U.S. is that China is already deeply embedded in the global robotics supply chain. Chinese companies are producing large numbers of inexpensive robots, and Beijing has built a dominant position in many of the components needed to make them work. This is another reminder that the U.S.-China competition is no longer just about tariffs or trade balances. It is about who controls the technologies that will shape the next several decades. While technology competition is heating up, Beijing also continues its pressure campaign against Taiwan. Over the past week, China has expanded Coast Guard and military activity around the island, particularly east of Taiwan. That matters because the eastern side of Taiwan is strategically important. In a crisis, it is where Taiwan would look for support and resupply from outside partners. On Friday, China's Coast Guard sent vessels east of Taiwan in what Beijing described as routine law enforcement patrols. Taiwan saw it differently, accusing Beijing of using law enforcement as a way to normalize Chinese presence in waters beyond the island's immediate vicinity. At the same time, Taiwan reported continued Chinese military activity around the island, including aircraft crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait. These actions are part of Beijing's broader gray zone strategy, applying constant pressure without crossing the threshold into open conflict. China is also pushing this approach elsewhere. Around Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea, Chinese military and Coast Guard forces conducted patrols while claiming they were defending Chinese sovereignty. Again, the pattern is familiar. Beijing increasingly uses maritime law enforcement, military presence, and political messaging together to gradually expand what it considers normal operating space. Inside Taiwan, officials are responding by targeting what they describe as Chinese influence operations. Taiwan's Interior Ministry announced plans to seek the dissolution of the Chinese Unification Promotion Party, accusing it of ties to organized crime, election interference, propaganda activity, and efforts to recruit military personnel for espionage. The party, founded by former Bamboo Union Triad leader Chang An-lei, has long been controversial in Taiwan. The government's move reflects a broader concern across democracies about how authoritarian governments use political organizations, business networks, and social groups to influence foreign societies. Inside China's own military, Xi Jinping is continuing his long-running anti-corruption campaign. Ahead of the People's Liberation Army anniversary, Xi emphasized that the military must remain completely loyal to the Communist Party and called for greater use of unmanned systems and cyber capabilities. The timing matters. China has spent years trying to modernize the PLA into a force capable of competing with the U.S. military, but those efforts have been complicated by corruption investigations and leadership purges. Xi's message was clear: technology matters, but political loyalty still comes first. Beyond Taiwan, China and Russia continue showing signs of military coordination around Japan. Japanese forces tracked a combined naval group involving Chinese and Russian vessels operating through Japanese waters. The activity was not unprecedented, but it reflects a growing pattern of cooperation between Beijing and Moscow designed to complicate U.S. and allied planning in the Indo-Pacific. And finally, a reminder that the intelligence competition is not just happening in cyberspace. It is also happening inside institutions. Belgian authorities arrested a Canadian NATO intern suspected of spying for China while working at NATO's Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe in Mons. Officials said the incident did not affect NATO operations, but the case highlights a persistent challenge for Western governments: protecting sensitive information in an era where intelligence collection increasingly targets people, access, and networks, rather than just traditional military secrets. Thanks for listening. Stay curious, stay kind, and never let anyone convince you that asking questions is a security threat. For the written brief, visit restrictedhandling.substack.com.